Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast. Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 6. I want to thank Hannah Hester for her comment on iTunes about this podcast. She said, "A fun podcast. I love the Fun Ideas Podcast more than Brett Kavanaugh loves beer." Mark Arnold is a great interviewer. I'll be listening faithfully to each episode. Thank you, Hannah. These shows are coming so fast and furious, I don't have enough to say about the progress of my various projects. I did finally go through my book created and produced by Total Television from 2009 to check for errors to correct for my upcoming Total Television scrapbook, and surprisingly, there wasn't as many errors as I originally thought. The most glaring, of course, was saying that Harvey Siegel was dead. But I am correcting that by transcribing an interview I did with him in 2014, and thankfully at this moment he is still with us. The only other glaring error was saying the Beatles, let's get this right, the only other glaring error was saying the Beatles cartoon show aired on CBS. It was the Beagles cartoon show that did. The Beatles only aired on ABC. In everything else that I'm doing, the Warren Kremer book, the Chipmunks book, the Monkeys solo book, the Pink Panther DVDs, I'm playing the waiting game. But everything should be out within the next year. I'm not planning any new projects until some of these other projects have come out. Our guest today is Mort Todd. Now, he may not want me to tell you this, his real name is Michael Delfamine, but this is my podcast. Mort has worked for Marvel, with work appearing in a number of titles, including his own Curse of the Weird and Monster Menace, which reprinted old Ditko and Kirby monster stories from the 50s and early 60s, as well as more mainstream stuff like Spider-Man. He also worked for DC and Superman, among other characters. And he's currently the publisher and editor for Charlton Neo, a company devoted to reprinting many Charlton comic stories from the past and hiring ex-Charlton creators for some new material. But he is, like it or not, best remembered for his 5-year tenure on Cracked Mazagine, where he never called it that during that period, from 1985 to 1990. During that time, he replaced Paul Lakin, who unfortunately was becoming increasingly irrelevant. He then took the magazine into newer directions with younger ideas and also bringing new artists into the fold like Dan Close and luring classic artists like Steve Ditko into the pages of Cracked. But his piece de resistance at Cracked was his uncanny ability to lure longtime mad stalwarts to Cracked's pages, such as writer Lou Silverstone and especially artist Don Martin. Here he is, Mort Todd. So, hello Mort, how are you doing?
Fine, and yourself?
Fine.
Excellent.
Well, that's it. All right, thank you very much. Good night.
Okay, you bet. Talk to you again in a couple of years.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so I put the post out on the Cracked magazine page and just kind of said, it's like, do you have any questions other than the typical ones? But people ask the typical ones, and maybe they haven't read the book, the Bible.
Oh, they're so misinformed. How could they fix that, Mark? How could they possibly get a copy of your book?
Amazon, maybe? It's called If You're...
I can't remember. What was the title of it?
It's called If You're Cracked, You're Happy, and there's actually 2 volumes. Volume 1, W-O-N, and Volume 2, T-O-O. And I seem to remember that you helped out design the front cover for this thing.
The secret is revealed.
Oh.
And what's the ISBN number?
Well, I have the book here. Have a look. Some 13-digit thing.
And when is the movie version?
The movie version. Don't say that. People will probably want that, and we'll have to produce it. The Cracked magazine story. Boom, boom, boom.
Right.
All right, that was a good 3 seconds of film. All right, next. All right. right. So let's begin at the beginning. Obviously, we're going to talk about Cracked, but I mean, you worked on a lot of other things, and so I'll just mention names so everybody thinks I'm paying attention to them. So Larry Schell, Doug Holverson, and Bill Rebel all had questions, which I'm pretty much going to ask. So now, before Cracked, tell us about yourself pre-Cracked.
Pre-Cracked. Well, I was a tiny little spawn growing up in Maine and being a comic geek and, into all media, movies, TV, and at a very young age, I started noticing credits on TV shows when I was like 4 or something. And so I guess my first job as an editor was the editor of our camp newspaper. A camp Wawanock called the Wigwag, and I did comics for it and edited it, and it was one of those old spirit duplicator machines. And after the summer was over, I swiped it and took it home with me until the next summer and printed comics and stuff. So it was a creative little cuss. So that was my first dabbling into the print world, and then same in high school and everything. Did a newspaper and with comics and junk like that, and then moved to New York when I was 17, right out of high school, and hooked up with some fellow miscreants like Dan Clowes and Rick Altergott, and we self-published our own funny books called Psycho Comics, and started our individual careers. And and also back then too, I'd be like hanging out and had drinking buddies like Pete Bag and J.D. King and jokers like that. So there was a pretty amusing punk comic underground industry. And then started freelancing, I did record covers and posters for bands, and did that Back from the Grave series, which was fun. It was garage rock from the 1960s that this friend of mine would dig up and get rights to, and then I did covers with like punk zombies attacking hippies on every cover. Did like 7 of those or so, and they have a bit of a cult following. And the first cover I did is now in the permanent punk collection at Cornell University.
Yay.
So legit. But yeah, I was pretty into the music scene, and knew a lot of bands.
Was that really the direction you wanted to go, or because now it seems like you're more known for doing editing and publishing more than art? Even I know you've done a lot of art, so I'm not knocking that. It's just
yeah. Well, it was I was doing like advertising. I was doing anything, and everything that I could possibly do as a broke teenager and junk, and so even did TV production and animation, and since then I've done music production and film and video. So as long as it's creative, and I try to reach the widest audience possible. But it just was that I was into music and knew a lot of bands, did ads for them, record covers, and and that actually led to my stint at Marvel, because I did a line of rock comics there.
Right.
And so so it's funny because like on Facebook I've got I think about a third of the people just know me from my music stuff, and a third know me from comics, and the other third are
like, who is this guy?
To jail with. Yeah, exactly.
And why did he change his name? Actually, that is a question I've never asked you. Why did you change your name?
Because my real name is just, no one could pronounce it or spell it and everything. And so since high school, I used, even earlier, I would, as a little kid, I'd be drawing monsters and come up with different, name every week for signatures. For a while there, I was Eric Claudine, who was the Phantom of the Opera's real name and stuff like that.
That's true.
So
That's true. You've used other names like on the Ugly Family. What was it?
Yeah.
Eel Gillespie and Stosh, or which one were you? I forget which one.
It's the other way around. Yeah, Eel O'Brien and Stosh Gillespie.
There we go.
Yeah, Eel O'Brien, of course, was the secret identity of Plastic Man, who was my favorite character, and Stosh Gillespie is a combination of Dan Clowes. I guess his father wanted to name him Stosh, and his mother wouldn't allow that. And his middle name's Gillespie, so that's where that came from.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and I'd be remiss not to mention, first time my name appeared in print was when I was like 13 in Famous Monsters of Filmland, which was actually in an article as opposed to like the letters page and stuff, because me and about 10 other kids corrected Forey Ackerman on who did Boris Karloff's makeup in The Ghoul. And Forey was so cool that he would go like, yeah, I made a mistake, and he did a whole article about it and put our names in it and
that's
junk.
cool. So which name was published? Was it Michael or Mort or what?
Yeah, it was Michael, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And by an odd coincidence as well, it was the first Famous Monsters convention happened when that issue came out. So I went to it. That was my first convention, and got to meet Forey and got an autograph and go, that's me! And I don't think he knew what I was talking about. But he signed it anyways.
Oh, that's cool.
And the cover was a Wax Museum cover by Ken Kelly.
Oh, I remember that one, yeah.
I guess probably like 20 years later, like 20 years later, I worked with him on the Kiss book at Marvel and junk, so
wow.
It's a weird thing, and that's just it. I've gotten to work with all the comic artists and stuff I really loved as a kid, because by the time I was working in comics, no one would give him work, you know.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned Marvel. Is Marvel the first comic company you worked for, or was it actually Cracked?
No, actually, DC.
DC, okay.
I wrote some Superman stories for Julie Schwartz and Nelson Bridwell, and that was a gas too, because I was just such a geek. I wanted to do all kinds of retro type stories, and this is just as they were turning into that John Byrne, retcon thing. So I got kind of squoze out then, but that was about when Cracked started. So
now on the DC stories, how did you get that? Did you meet Julius at a convention, or?
Nope, just mailed some plots.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. And what was really cool is because Nelson Bridwell would go through them, and he liked mine, and so
that's cool.
Called me up. I went in to meet him, and boy, he was such a great guy, Nelson Bridwell.
Yeah.
And as I've said before, Nelson did tons of reprints at DC, edited them, and he was a big influence on how I did the Cracked reprints, because he would do them by theme, and then also have historical backgrounds about the stories and the creators and junk.
Right, and you got him to write for Cracked later, so that was pretty cool.
Indeed, yeah, he died, pretty soon after that, which was a real shame. And he was probably like one of the comic books first fans ever, that went into the industry. He was a big collector. He lived on the Lower East Side and had his insane collection. I visited him a couple times there, and I was just like, oh my God.
Now,
when I'd see him at DC, we'd both make all these obscure jokes about, Kandorians or, just ridiculous joke based on mindless trivia that only he and I would ever get,
Now, when you were working there, did you just hang out in the office, or did you just come in occasionally? How did that work?
Yeah, it was occasionally. I wasn't there all the time and stuff. But, oh, boy. That Julie Schwartz, though, too, just as an editor, was a real education, because, just in a couple words, he would give me the experience of decades, like storytelling and junk like that.
So So then,
pretty good.
Moving on to Cracked, of course. Well, did that happen concurrently, or did it just happen and fall in your lap?
No, it was a little bit later. Actually, I also should mention when I guess I was 19, I sold a TV pilot about these teenage rock and roll superheroes.
Yeah.
They were called the Ultimates, and because a friend and I were going to film school then, and Kevin McMahon, who did all our photo work at Cracked later, and who went on to produce like the Geraldo Show and Howard Stern TV and stuff like that. But so yeah, we'd sold this pilot when we were 19 to this German production company, and they shot the pilot in New York, all rebel underground, like shooting on subways without permits and having robots fight these teenagers and junk. And it was like a teen superhero rock band that were in these red and black outfits that were a lot like the Thunder Agents outfits, if you remember that, those red and black ones they were. And we had a few people in it that became celebrities later on, but the team consisted of a guy and two gals, and the guy was actually Dan Clowes, the actor, as an actor. And, we made him look like pretty much like Speed Racer, because back then he had a big mop of black hair and skinny as hell and stuff, and it's pretty good. So my friend Kevin's passed away, but I got all the tapes, and I got some velvet morning. I want to edit it because.
Okay, I was just wondering, where did it all go? Do you still have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because he did a final edit. He even has a little bit of animation in it and special effects, and we were also, we were just such geeks. We did a lot of like, in-camera effects with mirrors and pull focus and miniatures and junk. But so we sold the pilot, but it never got picked up as a series. So we just have that one pilot.
Did it ever air, or was it? Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. And the rights reverted back to us, but we shot it like with a real kind of 60s. Sensibility to it. Oh. So, I last saw it probably like 5 years ago, and it wasn't dated at all because, we did it sort of like a live-action animation. So,
that's cool.
The only thing that dates it is the location stuff in New York because it was like 80, 81, so... Oh, God, it was just such a dump, It was just like graffiti.
I was going to say, New York's totally changed.
Yeah, that's the only thing that dates it, but it also makes it look post-apocalyptic. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was like when I was 19, so I was figuring, all right, I sold the TV script, man. It's all smooth sailing from here.
And as we know, to this day, it's never smooth sailing. It's like, lots of potholes all the way in life.
Exactly.
But, okay, I was a Cracked reader since the 70s, and then you kind of came on the scene out of nowhere. Thank goodness you came out right after Paul Lakin had taken over and took it away from him. But I never once considered, I don't know, maybe it was just me, I always thought of Mad as like the gold standard or whatever, and I never contributed, I never thought about it or anything. How did you fall upon it to even consider working there, much less contributing to it and even eventually becoming the editor?
Right. Well, it was his interesting story because so when I moved to New York, I went to Parsons School of Design for a year and was doing illustration, and then I started getting work doing illustration, so I was like, screw this, what am I paying money for that? So I ended up going to School of Visual Arts for film and TV, and then I sold my pilot, so I was like, screw this. So, but regardless, I met, one of the first people I met was Pat Redding, and she is a phenomenal talent in her own right. She's an incredible illustrator and funny as heck. But before I was at Cracked, she actually got a job as assistant editor to Larry Hama at Marvel. And he had previously done Crazy magazine. And so when I'm a little out of breath, I just moved and I've been unpacking all day. And everything. So,
With the oxygen tank.
But so when these new publishers in New York bought Cracked from Sproul, Robert Sproul, right? And I keep mixing him up with Bill. It's Robert Sproul.
Yeah, Bill's the son.
Who was based in Florida. So the New York publishers bought it and moved it up to New York. And so, they needed an editorial staff. And so I don't know how they got in touch with Lakin. Probably the same way they got in touch with me. They called Marvel and asked Hama if he wanted to edit it, and he was like, no. So they asked for some suggestions, and it's very likely that's how they got Lakin.
Okay. I'll have to ask Hama sometime, but I'm sure Hama was deep in G.I. Joe at that point, so he's like...
Oh, yeah, he had tons of better things going on. And
because he liked his crazy years, but he doesn't regret it ending, so I know that about him, because I've talked to him before about it.
So, as some of your listeners may not be aware, Lakin had worked for every humor magazine in existence and created a few of his own, and and he was kind of regurgitating his old stuff, so the publishers realized pretty quickly that that it wasn't really appealing to the youth market, and so they were looking for someone hipper to come on as like the assistant editor or something like that. So they called Larry again, and thanks to my good friend Pat, she suggested me, and so I went up for an interview. And they were like, what would you do with the magazine? And and I gave a critique of what had come out so far with the Lakin books, and so I guess they liked what I had said. And they were like, well, what would you do for the magazine? So I actually said, well, you know what? Tell you what I'm gonna do. I'll draw a 3-page story to give you an idea of what I do. So I did parody of He-Man versus G.I. Joe, called, of course, He-Man versus G.I. Joke.
Yes.
And
witty. They
liked it. And another thing, right? So that's what made me a billionaire. And so another thing too, they wanted someone on staff because Lakin was basically packaging it from Long Island and would bring it in. So they wanted someone in the office too. So that was me.
Yeah.
So they installed me on Fifth Avenue, nice little office that I was sharing for a while with some porn magazines, and then that as things progressed, what happened? They would allow me to do like basically commission half the book, and also actually my first thing I told them is like, hey, these issues don't have Severin, and if you don't have Severin, there is no Cracked. This magazine is going to die quickly without Severin. Yeah. So they were like, okay, that's your first job, get Severin. So I called Severin. And, it turned out Lakin was pulling some shenanigans and, offered Severin an insultingly low page rate and also wanted a kickback because he'd been getting kickbacks from all the artists and stuff. And so, Severin was like, okay, I'll do it, but I don't want to have anything to do with Lakin. And I was like, yep, I promise you won't. So that started an incredibly fun relationship because, John Severin is just, no matter who you are, everyone has ultra respect for Severin's work. He's just an incredible talent, and I was really honored to work with him and collaborate with him. And he was a bit of a mentor to me because when I started there, I was like 23, so I was still a little green. I figured I was an adult at 18, but still had a lot to learn. So then, I found out Lakin was pulling some other cheesy things like, reprinting material from like Sick or something under Cracked and getting paid for it and junk. So I showed it to the publishers and they canned them. And then they started looking for another editor to take over. And meanwhile, I was just producing the books on my own, and they interviewed a bunch of people, and I was in on the interviews. And everybody was like, okay, first you should change the name and get rid of the mascot, Sylvester. And these publishers were like, we just paid, a pile of money for the title and the character and junk. Why would we want to get rid of it? And so for some reason, I was the only one that saw like what the print schedule was, I guess, or something. So I just started putting the books out myself, and they weren't having any luck finding an editor. And then finally, they were like, "Oh, you've been doing the book?" and then once they saw the numbers, they were like, "Okay, you're the editor."
Yeah. Well, you came in just at the right time, because I had started buying. I had always bought Crack kind of off and on during the later Sproul years, and then when Crazy went away, I started to buy it regularly. And then when Lakin came in, I go, oh, no, not Lakin again. And I was about ready to give it up. I just said, okay, I can't buy this Crack stuff. And you came in just like at the right time, like at the 4th or 5th issue, where it's like, okay, here's something different. Okay, let's give it a try. And then you turned it around pretty quickly once you took over. So it's like, okay, I like this. You're getting some new people in here, and hey, wow. And then later on, you got some really good people. But, which is my next question. It's like you got some different people like Steve Ditko and stuff.
After Severin, he was my first hire because I just loved Ditko. So
I think I've asked this before, but not on a podcast. But it's like, were these friends of yours, or just heroes, or you just wanted good quality artists, or what combination?
No, I didn't know him. You didn't know me from Adam, so I just called him up out of the blue. This was back in the day when they had phone books, and he was in the phone books.
Yeah.
So I called him up, and within 15, 20 minutes, he was in my office with his portfolio to prove that he could do. I know, right? And I was like, come on.
I used to draw a couple minor characters. I think you might have heard of them. Spider-Man, Doctor Strange.
So we became fast friends, and I would say that he and Ditko and Severin were like big influences on me when I was younger.
Yeah.
And then as an editor, they were big influences on me on everything, because I'd be on the phone with Severin, I don't know, like almost every day for hours, and then Ditko would come to the office, pretty constantly and stay for hours, and we'd just talk about everything, and it was pretty good. So yeah, we had a good mix of artists that I liked growing up, because we got of course Severin and Ditko, but Gene Colan and you name it. Plus a lot of the regular Crack artists like Rick Martin, and I got Bill Ward to come back to the magazine because he got screwed over too. But and then I got a lot of people who admittedly were my friends.
Yeah.
Like Klaus and Alterdot, and even Pat did some work, Pat Redding, and so it was a fun combo of classic veteran cartoonists and a lot of the youngsters like Bag and other people that are now living legends themselves.
Right. I know one, and I'll let you say it, but I know one. But was there anybody back then that you tried or didn't even try to get that you wish you had gotten at that time? I know one, and I'll tell you. But
who that?
Kirby.
Yes. You mean like some mad? There were some mad people.
Well, yeah, mad people, but just in general. Just you said that you kind of regretted never asking to see if they would do any work on Cracked. And I think you said when I talked to you before, Jack Kirby.
For sure. I don't know why I never thought of Kirby. Yeah, I just don't know why. I might have been just too, cowed by my publishers and stuff, because their whole thing is like, this is not a comic book, and so sometimes
shame on you.
They thought, I know, right? Sometimes they thought artists were too cartoony or comic booky as opposed to cartoony or something, and as I've said before, they really hated Dan Klaus's work, and so I had to sneak that in, and there were a few other artists that I had to turn them around about, but I don't know why I never thought of Kirby. And likewise, when I started Monsters Attack, there were a few artists that I tried to get that didn't work out, and I should have tried Kirby then too. I'm just retarded. I was like, at Marvel, I got to do some stuff with Kirby, but not art. I had him do some writing and junk, but
yeah.
But yeah, like at Monsters Attack, I tried to get George Evans, you know his work.
Yes.
To do a World War I flying ace story
like Aces High at EC or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this was like an aerial dogfight in World War I with a French werewolf and a German vampire. And he was like, nah, I don't think so. But he goes, you might want to try, John Severin. You might want to try Severin. And I was like, yeah, I know Severin. So
yeah.
John actually did draw it, and it never got published. And it is going to be a bonus feature when I finally get around to collecting the Monsters Attack book.
And when is that supposed to come out? I helped you with your Kickstarter. When?
Yeah, I think it'll come out around 2014.
Okay, got it. I'll get in my time machine. Oh, there it is.
Well, the thing is, it's like this thing is metastasized because originally I was just going to print some of the comics,
right?
And that's how I initially pitched it. And then I was like, nah, I guess I should do the articles too because that's part of it. Yeah. And so I don't have the mechanicals for the articles, and just scanning it would look like crap. So
right.
I've got them completely retypeset, putting in new photos, and then I was like, you know what? That's not enough either.
Yeah.
Because I'd written some introductions to the stories and memories and junk, but my brain ain't so good. So I ended up interviewing Cliff Mott, who was my art director at Cracked and Monsters Attack, about those days. So we got this really long interview that goes into all kinds of fun stuff about Cracked and Monsters Attack and drinking with cartoonists and all kinds of fun stuff.
Actually, that's a good story, and it is in the book. If you're correct, you're happy, but we will tell it anyway. How did you get Monsters Attack started in the first place?
Oh, by being devious.
That's why I'm having you just say this one. I like this story.
Right. It's basically the same way I became editor of Cracked, is just being underhanded. So it was, well, because I always liked, all the monster humor magazines that Cracked did, like, for Monsters Only, and they would do a lot of reprints with monster themes. So I started doing a few of those collections, and I put them under the title Monster Party, Cracked Monster Party,
right.
Which, as you may know, is a play on Mad Monster Party.
I never thought that.
Which is, the Harvey Kurtzman, Jack Davis, Rankin Bass.
Right.
Thing. So I was like, that'll show them. But so we did it under Crack Collector's Edition and stuff, and they were so popular. We were like, hey, let's do a Monster Party magazine itself, and so we did that, and that ran for a while. And the thing was, we were using all these artists like Severin and Pat Boyette and Ditko, Graham Morrow, and I was like, these guys can do legit horror, And of course, as I said, I was a big fan. I first published my name in Famous Monsters, and I like Creepy and Eerie. And all these artists had worked at Creepy and Eerie and even EC Comics and, Tales from the Crypt, all that stuff. So I was like, I want to do a serious horror magazine. And the publishers were like, yeah. Kept putting me off and everything. So finally, I took it upon myself to, order a UPC for the magazine and schedule printing time without telling the publishers. And so I totally put out the first issue without their approval at all. And they were super pissed and canceled it immediately. And much like, other things that I've done, like The Ugly Family and junk, they slowly, they saw the sales numbers and they were like, you know what, we're going to put that Monsters Attack magazine back up. And I can't remember the space between the first and second issue, but it might have been like half a year or something like that. Cause, originally I wanted to do, I think, bi-monthly or something. But
yeah.
So we got it going again, and then by the time, like, I was putting together the 5th issue, I wasn't really enjoying, my stay there at Cracked. Had been like 5 years and stuff, so that's when I departed. And so the editors that took over didn't really have a feel for the magazine. So.
Right. Did you do I forgot, did you do the last issue, the 5th issue, or no?
I commissioned probably like half of it.
Okay.
And then they did the rest, and like like the stories they commissioned are more like crime than horror.
Yeah. Well, I never saw the first or the 5th one on the stands. In fact, the 5th took me years to find that one. It was like, so I don't even know if it was distributed very well, but hey.
Right.
But 2, 3, and 4 I found easily, but
Yeah. It just says the 5th one. I'd never really read the 5th one until probably the last 5 years or so, and it just seemed a little lackluster, if I do say so. But it had some of the articles I commissioned and comics and stuff. But be that as it may.
So the big question, and I devote a chapter to this in the book, but how and why did you lure Mr. Don Martin, Mad's maddest artist, into the Cracked fold?
Why, did you ask?
Yeah, how and why?
I think the why would be obvious.
Well, yeah, okay, fine, but...
Because it's Don Martin. Of course, because, like I said, as a kid, I was just into everything, and I had all of Don Martin's paperbacks, and Yickety Yackety and everything. I was just, every kid, even kids that weren't into comics, loved Don Martin stuff, and would etch it into their school desks and stuff. I would say like him, Don Martin and Rat Think, like you see that stuff everywhere with kids that didn't even care about comics.
I guess why, in the standpoint of why did you think you could get Don Martin, that would be the why, not why.
Yeah.
Why consider Don Martin? Of course, you'd want all the best artists and funniest artists in your magazine, but
Right.
That's what it.
Well, what happened, by an odd coincidence, my girlfriend at the time, her mother was a literary agent and was friends with a lawyer who reps Don. And so, it must have come up that I was a Cracked and everything, and, that Don wasn't happy at Mad, and would I be interested or something like that? So I was like, would I?
Hairlip, no.
Yeah. So, I called him right up, and, we worked it out pretty sweet that, he'd get the same page rate, and as opposed to Mad, he'd be able to own his original art and also own the copyright to his work, which he hadn't had for like 30 years at Mad.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a no-brainer, and it made world headlines.
Yes. Well, it is the first time, I've said this before, it's like, people think, how did you not know this, that, and the other? And it's like, well, if you go back 30, 40 years, there was no internet in the way it is now.
Yeah.
And, you just kind of found out news, and if there was comic book news, it was never about Cracked. It was always about the regular big two, or nothing, and so if Cracked changed ownership, I didn't know about it. Just suddenly one issue was Sproul and the next one was Lake, and I go, what happened here? And then, it's the same thing. Don Martin, though, I did get a heads up because I did see a couple pieces ahead of time saying Don Martin's coming to Cracked, and in fact, that press release, I think, was like 3 or 4 months before he actually appeared, and I go, is this really true, or is that an April Fool's joke? And then finally he appeared. You had it was a Severin cover, and you had a little Don Martin figure pasted in the corner. Yeah. So even you said, I think that was like a last minute thing for that issue.
Yeah, that was as quick as we could go because of our lead time. Sure, that as soon as everything got signed, we're like, let's do it.
Yeah.
And even that first cover he did, the next issue.
Yeah.
Even that was, I think, right on the spur of the moment because that was a piece of art he'd already done, so it wasn't like a new piece. We just repurposed it with a Cracked Infinity cover.
Right. You just scribble out mad and no.
No. But yeah, I mean, he was a great guy, fun guy, and I think he and all the other mad artists had been kind of enslaved at the magazine. I mean, admittedly, they got great page rates and good exposure, but they also kept them pretty much like indentured servants.
Yeah.
It's like I'd heard from artists that, like, if an ad agency wanted to use an artist, they wouldn't forward their information to them.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I mean, you look at Jack Davis. He became a millionaire because he got blackballed from Mad.
Yeah.
He had to find other work, whereas, like, Mort Drucker, he did, like, American Graffiti movie poster.
Yeah, that's about it.
That was pretty much it. Yeah,
he did a few album covers here and there, but not the level of Davis. No.
Right, and that was because probably, like, Lucas was, like, called Mad, and Mad was like, nope, we don't give out the addresses, and Lucas put in $1 worth of effort to call information and get his number in Long Island or something. But that happened with Don a lot. He did do some advertising. There was like some, I don't know if it's American Airlines or some airline. He did a series of ads for some airline in the late 60s, and so there was stuff here and there. But they would go out of their way to not let their artists at Mad be used for campaigns, for whatever reason.
Now, do you think? Go ahead.
Well, it just cut down on the revenue of these artists, and I would think the exposure would help the magazine.
Now, do you think if Feldstein had stayed on at Mad for a few more years, you would not have been successful at luring Don or anybody else away?
Oh, no, because, I mean, Don wanted to leave a long time.
Oh, okay. So you think you would still have been successful if Feldstein stayed? Because I kind of always think it was kind of the luck of the draw that, well, there's no loyalty there, and the editor is now changed, and I don't know if, I guess people had some sort of allegiance to Meglin and Ficarra, but not the same type of thing,
Yeah, I think it was more Gaines, because, I tried to get Mort Drucker.
Yeah.
And talked with him, and he basically said, well, I needed some heart surgery a couple of years ago, and Bill Gaines advanced me the money, so I feel like, I owe allegiance to him.
Yeah. Well.
Whereas, that was another thing, too, with like Don Martin and Severin at Cracked, is we had health plan. And it wasn't like we paid it all, but they could join our health plan, so it'd be a lot cheaper if they did it themselves. And,
right.
And Mad didn't offer anything like that, so a lot of those artists were just getting old and had medical expenses, and if Gaines deigned to lend you the money at who knows what kind of interest rate.
Now the other people that went over, like Lou Silverstone and Jerry DiFusio and things like that, did you approach them, or did they approach you, or is it a combination, or?
I don't remember with Lou. I'm pretty sure he got in touch with me because he was probably doing stuff for about a year for us under pseudonyms before.
Yeah.
I guess he got outed by a disgruntled cracked artist. And
you can read about it in the book.
Yeah. And so when I was getting ready to leave, I wanted to make the transition as easy as possible. So I think I'd already had Jerry as an associate editor, though he didn't really come into the office or do anything. And so I set up Lou to take over. And Jerry was John Severin's cousin-in-law.
That's right.
Yeah, Jerry was John's wife Mickey's cousin.
Yeah.
So they had been they'd been together since the 40s or earlier. So. And Jerry, like Nelson Bridwell, was one of the first legit comic book fans from the 40s and 50s that were fanatical about collecting, but also finding out who creators were. And you think it was tough in the 80s 30s to find out information about comics. Imagine in the 40s.
Right.
And both Jerry and Nelson, had incredible collections, and Jerry also commissioned tons of original art from tons of artists. So I just always been curious about both of them when they passed away. What happened to all that stuff?
Just toss it in the trash.
Boy, boy.
Let's see. So, what's the basic reason you left Cracked? Was it just you hadn't done enough, or you just were getting frustrated?
Yeah, it was a little like, because I mean, you might even know better than me how many books I was putting out a month or a year. I think it's probably something like at least 30 books a year.
Well, yeah, the regular Cracked, which is almost monthly, and then the collector's edition and the monster one and the other monster one.
I mean, people go like, oh, they're reprints, so that must have been easy, but,
Well, you put a little care into them, it's like...
Yeah. And there's all the behind-the-scenes stuff. It's like, the printers say, oh, we can't find the film for this story or something like that, whereas, we either had to recreate it or figure out what other issue it was reprinted. So, it's just not like, we were churning that out effortlessly. But, I had, like, part-time assistant editors every now and then, but I really wanted a full-time assistant editor. And I was getting paid well. I didn't mind that, but I just wanted more time off, and, because I like traveling and junk. And, and so, we just came at loggerheads, and, I think, in retrospect, I think they were kind of squeezing me out, the publishers, because, they sold it fully to Globe soon after.
Right.
And I think they were trying to give them a package that would be, that was profitable and cheap to produce. So that's why they wouldn't make any more hires or, other stuff. And when I left, they had to replace me with, like 3 or 4 editors.
Well, at least 2,
I was doing anyway.
Yeah. Well, so it was like your assistant anyway. But hey. Now, what did you do immediately after? Did you go? Just what did you do immediately afterwards?
Well, I started my own company because this was, because like when. Clouds and I and a few others did that Psycho Comics. That was like early 80s, just as the direct sales was starting. Mm-hmm. And so we did direct sales for that and did kind of okay. So this would be the late 80s, and so I started my own company. And I did a collection of Bill Ward's art called World of Ward, shot from his originals. And I got Steve Ditko to do a new Mr. A series, and I had Paquito, which was a bilingual Spanish comic, like Dennis the Menace, Vic Martin and George Glatter and a few other crack people. And
I don't think I've seen that. No.
But the direct sales market, they only wanted, mutants.
Yeah.
They only wanted X-Men. So, like, even with Mr. A by Ditko, I was going to do that as a color book, and the first issue was solicited for 1,000 copies, and it was like, there's no way I could afford to print it at that. Because get this was pre-digital, right?
Yeah.
So back then, to do a color comic, each page for color separations alone was $1,000. So that each book would have cost like $32,000, not counting, paying Ditko and stuff.
Were you still laying things out on boards and stuff like that, at that point, or was it all transitioning to digital?
No, digital really didn't happen until like really late 90s in comic.
Okay.
So this was like 10 years before that. So.
Yeah, because I know it was that decade things started changing, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
I'm just trying.
No, but we were still doing like the color separations like old school, and boy, oh boy, it was expensive back then.
Yeah.
And and now all those companies don't exist anymore, and now you can do separations for free.
Yay!
Thanks to Photoshop. Yeah. It's incredible.
And all the artists are gone. Well, anyway. Now,
but I like the fact that, I grew up right during the transition because, like those record covers I was telling you about, I would do hand separations with those.
Oh, wow.
Where you would do 16 layers on top of the artwork for every color and every graduation. And so a lot of those covers I did without seeing the actual color until it was printed, and knowing 25% red and 30% blue, give me a light green,
In your education at the school, was it more for graphic arts, or what was your emphasis then? I mean,
at Carson's, the first year was, it was called Foundation. So you just learned all the stupid basic stuff, which, I'd already been, printing and publishing and doing advertising and record covers. So, it was just basically goofing off. And so, I didn't really learn anything about technique or production. That's all, everything's self-taught, and the same with computers. I had to self-teach myself everything for, Photoshop and production, and like I said, it helped at Cracked. It was a crash course because I didn't know about production really, making sure the pages are the right size and you bleed and you trim and all this stuff. So I learned pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was gonna say you learned pretty quickly.
No, I never had any real formal education for any of this stuff.
Because I never noticed at Cracked you had any mad number 151 errors, if you know what I mean.
No, what was that?
That was the one where the cover's way off center and it says "Mad salutes the printing industry." That one, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just it. Once I learned stuff, I tried to, do funky stuff, like when we do flip books or something, with half the book upside down and junk.
Yeah, and you did that pretty early on too. That was your 4th or 5th issue that you did that, where you were editor. It's like, wow.
Yeah. And that's just it. Printers would be like, you sent these pages upside down.
Yeah.
Duh.
I know.
It's even tougher now to try and do that digitally because, there's no one you can talk to about it because it's all, computered.
Yeah.
Going this book is rejected or something.
Yeah. It's not supposed to be upside down. Now, the Marvel books I'm familiar with, you said you worked Marvel earlier, those Monster Menace and the Tales of the Weird, which I didn't see those when they originally came out.
Curse of the Weird.
Curse of the Weird, sorry.
Curse of the Weird.
Curse, yeah. I don't have it in front of me. I don't have my script today. How did those come about? Were you just asked to do those, or you volunteered to do those? How, because I don't think
a little of both.
Oh, okay.
A little of both, because when I got hired to start my own imprint at Marvel, the Marvel music books,
right,
and it took about a year to get all contracts signed and get bands and all this stuff and everything. So I pretty much had my own imprint and everything. And but there was the editor-in-chief of Marvel, just saw me, goofing around and blowing money and thought I wasn't really working. So he was like, I want you to do these reprint books and like what kind of stuff would you want to do? And I was like, horror and crime, because it's like they got enough superhero shit.
Yeah,
so, oops, I just swore on your podcast.
Oh fuck.
And so they said okay for horror, but not crime, which is a shame because I would love to do some crime books. And because they did tons of pre-code crime in the 40s and 50s. So they were like, okay, come up with 4 different horror books, 4 issues each, and we'll spread it out over a year. And I was like, no. We'll do 4 horror books, 4 titles at the same time. I want to get these out of my way. So I ended up doing a book a week for 16 weeks. They were shuffled. So, and I came up with 4 different kinds of horror. I came up with Curse of the Weird was some pre-code, but it was all spooky. Ditko and Russ Heath and Kubert and just oddball stuff. And I did Monster Menace, which was all their giant monster stuff, by Kirby and Ditko mostly. And then I did Book of the Dead, which was Frankenstein from the 70s and Man-Thing. And that had some nice painted covers on it.
Yeah.
And the other book I did was my one, acquiescence to superheroes, but I did Dracula versus. So it was 4 issues, 4 number ones of like Dracula versus X-Men, Dracula versus Spider-Man, Dracula versus Silver Surfer, and what was the other one? Dracula versus some other superhero.
So, Bushman. Okay.
And foolishly, stupidly, in retrospect, I should have gotten Gene Colan to do all these covers, but I was just being such a little snot that I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna get all the the groovy superhero artists to do these covers and stuff."
But aren't you still? Anyway.
Yeah, now I'm snobby senior.
Snobby senior.
Yeah. And this time it's with real mucus.
On those books, did you have access to the actual original art, or did you have scans, or what would you do? Yeah.
No, but what was so fun is that Marvel had they had evolved of stats. And so I would go over there and visit a lot and dig up the original stats from the 50s and stuff and go, because sometimes you get the film that already had the color.
Yeah.
But, this was like, shitty, 70s comic book color.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Because your books look pretty sharp, so that's what I thought. You did stats or originals or something.
Right. So no, mostly I tried to find the original stats and have them recolored, like that Bill Everett zombie story and stuff. I was just like, when I found that, because all those stats are in disarray. They were not in any alphabetical order or anything. And every now and then I'd come across like 1940 stats with like Submariner and Human Torch, and I'd be like, wow. And and then I'd find like a Kriegstein or an old Joe Kubert or some Wally Wood stuff, and I'd be like, yes. And what was really convenient is this Marvel vault. It wasn't at Marvel itself, a few blocks away. And it was right across the street from one of my favorite bars, Billy's Topless, which was a legend at Marvel. I mean, not at Marvel, in New York.
Oh, okay.
And I'd been going there since I moved here basically, and it was like an old school Topless. It was like a neighborhood bar, but it had dancers, and I got to become friendly with many of them, date a few of them, and so it was.
I assume it's long gone right now. It's typical of it.
Yeah, well, they were phasing it out, and they changed the name from Billy's Topless to Billy's Stopless, and then after
Stopless.
but there were a lot of gals that worked there that went on to other things, like I'm pretty sure Goldie Hawn was working there in the early '60s.
Oh wow!
And and the guy who ran it was a riot. He had one of those he was in the Flatiron Building and had one of those old offices, like a Hollywood producer, with tons of photos on the wall of burlesque stars and everything, and chewing on a cigar and all that. It's like old school. But yeah, Billy's was great. And like I said, I met a few girls there. They're really nice girls. And so that was what was cool. The Marvel vault was right there. And also, we'd have clients come in from out of town, like printers or whatever. I'd take them over there, and they'd be impressed because all the girls would be like, Mort, what's that? Yeah, it was the golden age.
Yes. So I like those books. I didn't see them till years later because I didn't even know about it, because by the 90s, me and Marvel were not good friends. So, but those are really good books, and it's like, why? I think my opinion is they kind of just got lost in the shuffle, unfortunately. And
and they just weren't, they weren't X-Men.
Yeah.
And that's just it on Facebook. Like I said, I get different crowds that follow me. Some of them are because of those books,
Yeah.
and don't know, that I did Cracked or, record covers or the music books, and so you get a lot of.
Now, how long did the music? How long did the music stuff last at Marvel? I know it was a few years, but
not long enough. Yeah, I think about 3 years because Marvel had big plans for it, and they just couldn't follow up.
Yeah.
They were talking about record store distribution, that kind of. I was trying to do multimedia deals, and Marvel wouldn't follow up on them because some of our best sellers were like, if it tied in with an album, like we did the Alice Cooper book with Neil Gaiman and Michael Zulli, and that was actually the first issue was actually packaged with the CD, and that sold really good. And we did stuff like a tie-in with the second Woodstock, or maybe it was even the third Woodstock or whatever. And we sold like a couple 100,000 on MTV that weekend. And, and if a band took the comics on tour, and that was the whole plan, but just Marvel didn't get their shit together.
Yeah. Well, during that decade, that was when Marvel kind of did the big, we're not going to do any other licensed stuff cut. And I think they stopped Star Trek and the Paramount comics, and I think the last thing they did for a number of years was Mighty Heroes. They did one issue of that, of all things. And
the Terry Tube?
Yes, they did one issue of it, like in '98, and that was it. They said, no more licensed stuff. We're just going to do our own superheroes. I'm sure you were gone by that point, but, it's like... And I go... Well, I'm done with Marvel, too, at this point. Because that's the stuff I like.
Inviting me out.
Yes.
Well, see, and besides the music books, too, I tried to do some other wacky licensing things. Like I did the Spumco comic. Did you ever see that?
Oh, yeah, the comics books. Oh, we can't talk about John Kay now, but anyway. No, go ahead.
Because that was like I think that was like the first tabloid book that Marvel had done in a couple decades.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I can't think of it now, but and like with the Marvel music stuff, sometimes we'd have like CDs in the comic, and do music videos and or computer games, like we did Rolling Stone comic that had an actual floppy disk that you could do this Dave McKean designed game in it and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. I remember all this stuff. I mean, I wish it continued. I don't know why. Yeah.
Well, there were tons of other books, too, that we had ready to go that never got printed, like an Elvis book by Colin and Severin, and the third book of the Bob Marley life, which Colin did, that had painted oils finishes by this Jamaican artist. And But we're talking with people because, these are all licensed, so the bands own the material and everything, so they can reprint them. Now, the Cooper book, I think, got reprinted a couple times. I think Dark Horse did it and somebody else.
Well, even the comic book, the one you're talking about with John Kay, that was reprinted at Dark Horse, I think, too.
Well, what happened is I put together 4 issues, and then Marvel canceled it after the first issue.
Right.
And so since John owned the rights, I took it to Dark Horse.
Okay.
What was funny, too, is once I quit Marvel, I was visiting up in Maine for our annual clam festival in my hometown, and and I get a call from Gene Simmons from Kiss, because he was like, I heard you left, and I was like, yeah. He's like, well, I've got a contract with Marvel. They got to put out my book or pay me like $1 million or something.
Wow.
So I was like, well, the book's almost done. He's like, yeah, but it's not done. So they made Marvel hire me, freelance.
Wow.
And so it was like this was what, mid-90s. I was getting $100 an hour to finish the book, like lawyer money.
Wow. Well, to Marvel is probably like, this is cheaper than a lawyer. We'll pay him.
Exactly. So, I always thank Gene for that, because that was a good bunch of money after I left. And I'll see a lot of these bands every now and then since then.
That's
in fact, like KRS-One, I just found out was in town up here in Maine last week, and I'm sorry I missed him, because we did this cool comic with him and Kyle Baker that had an animated video that was in rotation on Yo MTV, and that was a fun comic because it was like old school Power Records. came with a cassette or a CD that you would follow along with a comic, you know, that had actors and music and sound effects, and it was just short of turn the page, you know.
When Tinkerbell rings her little bells? Is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Well, I want to talk a little bit about Charlton Neo, but before that, you went back to Cracked one more time when it was like the maximum. You want to say anything about that, or move on?
Yeah, it was just, you know, these guys just had no idea what they were doing, you know.
Yeah.
As opposed to the current crack donors.
Yeah. Which, yeah, people ask me all the time, what's happened with Crack? Where is Cracked? And it's like, it's a website. It's a website. It was owned by Demand Media. Now it's owned by Scripps. You know, the actual legal aspect of it is kind of in limbo, but, you know, it's like, well, we'll figure it out. But, you know, okay, enough about that.
Well,
okay. Unless you have something else to say.
I guess this was probably like, 10, 12 years ago or something, 15 years ago, that this Kuwaiti company had bought the magazine, right? Mm-hmm. Bought Cracked. And they were trying to put it out like a men's mag or something. And you know, after I'd left Cracked, I did toy with the idea of doing like more of a, what I wanted to do was like scale, slick magazine, like sort of like the format Rolling Stone was then, you know, a little larger than magazine. Some comics, some articles and junk. So I saw this, it's sort of like, wow, yeah, that could work and everything. But after a few meetings with them, I just realized their editorial direction was like, you know, a lot of poo-poo jokes and boobies and stuff. And I was just like, man, this is more juvenile than what I was doing. And also the you know, the page rates were ridiculous.
Wow.
They were just like, you know, a fraction of what they were when I was at the magazine. And they also had like, it was sort of like if you were an editor there, it was sort of like the Lacan school of editing, where, you know, the artist would get a crummy page rate and you'd get a kickback. That's how you get paid.
Wow.
Yeah.
That part
so
I didn't know.
They wouldn't, yeah, you wouldn't be making any money except off the backs of these other people. So I was just like,
So did you actually, I forgot, did you actually work on any of the issues, or were you gone before they even put one out?
I think they had done a dummy issue.
Yeah. And that's rarer than hen's teeth, and I didn't even know about it when I did my books. And I'd love to find one. Anybody out there, if you have one, just slip it to me.
Right.
It's not worth anything. Just give me one. Okay.
But hen's teeth aren't worth anything, right?
Yes, exactly.
But you know, I just saw their direction, and also, you know, not to just slag anyone. They had some people there that I knew from Marvel.
Yeah.
Working there on staff and everything,
yeah.
You know, like editorial, not creative in the least. And I didn't have much respect for him in the first place. So, you know, and they ended up working at a couple of them ended up moving to Kuwait because like they were planning like this big line of superheroes called. You ever hear about this? The 99, which is based on some you know, Islamic tenet about 99 ideals or something. So they were going to have 99 heroes that represent everything, and they were going to have like, get this,
take that, Avengers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they even did a team up with the Justice League. They did one issue with the Justice League or something. Jeez. But they were going to have like a theme park and this and that. And I was like, wait a second, you got superhero chicks running around in spandex, and you think this is going to work in Kuwait? And it didn't. So a couple of these guys ended up living in the Middle East for a couple of years, and, you know, one of them's female, and it was just like, God, what, are you that desperate for work? You know? It was just crazy. But, so that failed, and Crack failed, and
all right. Well, how did you get over? I mean, we're probably jumping years here, but I know you're doing the Charlton Neo stuff. I mean, did you just jump around different freelance things and finally land this or this gig?
Well,
or
around 2000, I started a media company called Comic Fix.
Okay.
And I did a couple newspaper strips for a while with like Speed Racer, and I did a celebrity biography comic with Severin, and I did a interactive soap opera comic, and so that ran for a little while, and that was called Molly the Model, and it was kind of based on my girlfriend at the time, who was an aspiring model, so it was just like I got tons of material about just how grievous it is to try and be a model, how much soap there is, and but then I was also doing a lot of video and film and animation production, most of the first decade of our new century, and directed a bunch of music videos, and I bought the rights to this Italian photo comic called Sadistic. Well, I named it Sadistic. It had a different name all over the world, and it's about this dude in a skeleton outfit that runs around committing crimes, and it's from the 60s, and it's really fun. It uses a lot of actors that were in a lot of European films. Like back then, I mean, the photo comics were big everywhere except in America. And so it would be like, if an actor in between films or TV series was like, oh yeah, I'll do a photo comic gig and stuff. And like that's where Federico Fellini started and got his chops doing photo comics and stuff like that. So it's a weird hybrid of comics and film. So I got the rights to that and putting them out in English, and that was really fun. And then we shot a documentary where we found a lot of the original actors, and just really great anecdotes and stories. And so I've been trying to sell that as a new series, either film or TV and stuff, for a few years. And every now and then it looks like I'm close to getting a deal, but people get scared by it, which kills me. It's like when you have slasher films or crime films or even broadcast TV, like sometimes on Gotham, that show about pre-Batman, like I'll see throat slashing or beheading and stuff on broadcast TV, and I'm like, oh my God. But like people will see this stuff and get scared by it, and it's a photo comic from the 60s, and it's definitely like PG-13, but there's something about it that just like triggers people, and I'm like, I think that's a good thing. Yeah. Because it really pushes the limit without pushing the limit. I mean, it's like, come on, so whatever. But so what happened with Charlton Neo? Yeah, and in between, I've been doing tons of freelancing with comics and advertising and blah blah blah. Started a newspaper when I moved back to Maine in 2011. Still got a lot of family up here in Junk, so I started a weekly comics newspaper up here that lasted about a year and used a lot of friends that I knew from that worked with it, Cracked and everything, and we just couldn't get enough advertisers to make it work. I mean, it would have like movie listings and other junk and everything, and it was a free weekly, but so that didn't work. And but I've been putting out my own comics.
Tell me about your failures.
Yeah, right. So I've been putting out regular books through Comic Fix with Sadistic and other stuff that was mostly by me. But then when would this have been? 2014? Yeah, I think 2014. This guy, Mark Knox is his name, and he goes by the name Fester Faceplant.
Oh, and okay. I know him.
You know Fester?
I do, yeah. By that name.
Right? So he knew me. He was one of those guys who knew me from Back from the Grave record covers because he was punk and everything. He knew I liked comics and stuff. So he added me to this Charlton fan page he started called the Charlton Arrow. And so, I checked it out, and there were a lot of people like Paul Kupperberg, who I'd known from DC, and Roger McKenzie, who I'd known as, being a comic geek, as writer of, the early Daredevil that Klaus Janson from Daredevil. I mean, the Frank Miller Daredevil before Miller squeezed him out and stuff, and a bunch of other creators, and they were talking about starting a tribute comic to Charlton. And I was like, let me in. I want to be part of this. So so I did a couple of stories for it and everything. And as it progressed, because originally they were just going to do like a black and white Xerox fanzine and stuff. But as it progressed, for whatever reason, Fester, couldn't make it happen and everything. So I was like, let me do it. So, so I basically, put it together as a regular full-color comic. And it went from there. We've done, like 10 issues of that. And all in all, I've probably done about 40 books in the last 4 years that Charlton related. Yeah. Because everyone wanted to get involved. It's funny because a lot of the original Charlton veteran artists and writers, as well as, more recent creators and stuff, they all wanted to do stuff. So, we've done, I'd say it's probably about half and half new material, and then we do some reprints, which are, most, like, I don't just, like, scan the comics from the books for the most part. We find like, the original stats, and like we did, like I did at the Marvel reprints, and, I recolor them and stuff like that, So
do you have access to all this stuff? I mean, I know that Charlton kind of sold off everything years ago, and DC got this, and somebody else got this, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Well, no, that's just it. I've people get in touch with me that have this stuff, like whether it's original art. Sometimes, we're shooting from the original art, or, they have the stats, the Charlton stats and stuff. So, it depends. It's a mishmash, but it's all good.
Okay.
I put out like 8 books of original Charlton covers from the 60s, and most of them by Dick Giordano, and they were from Giordano's collection that I got through his assistant that willed them to him after he passed away. And so, it's just like a couple hundred classic Charlton covers from the 60s that are just like really great. I broke it into 4 genres. We got like, all romance, all war, all sci-fi, and all, what's the other one? I can never remember that fourth genre. It's like
humor,
romance, war, science fiction, Western,
yes. In fact, that was the ones I've seen recently. You've been doing some recolorizations of, like, was it Billy the Kid or something like that? Things that Severin did.
What was that's it? Just it. Yeah, this the artist Bill Black, when he was at Charlton. Yeah, he ended up getting all the Severin stats for Billy the Kid. So, it's like over 100 pages of Billy the Kid by Severin that he did in the early 60s while he was at Cracked and everything. Because, back then he was doing like, he was doing over 100 pages a month, Severin, not counting paintings and covers and stuff. And, it might have even been more like 150 pages a month, which is just phenomenal with the quality of work that he was doing. So yeah, we got over 100 pages of Billy the Kid, so I colored them all. It took a couple years, but so we have 2 color volumes and 1 black and white volume, all collected, because it's kind of cool to see the stuff in black and white too, just to pore over Severin. Because it is funny, like getting back to the Crack days, it was like whenever a Severin page would come in and Ditko was in the office, he would like hold the page and he'd put his finger and trace the lines over the Severin art and everything. He was just like absorbing it, and that's what it's like. It's just like beautiful stuff that you can try to own by absorbing the art.
Forgive my ignorance. I should know this, but did Ditko and Severin ever cross paths prior to Cracked, or no? I know they both worked at Marvel, but not at the same time. So
yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. I figured you might know better than me.
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted them to work together. Yeah. And when I was at Marvel, I got an agreement from the Ayn Rand estate to be able to do Fountainhead Atlas Shrugged as a miniseries of graphic novels, because I figured Ditko would love to do that. And I don't know, are you familiar with the story?
A little bit, yeah. But
because it's basically a Doc Savage story.
Yeah.
It's about, it really is. It's an incredible adventure story about everyone who is at the peak of their skills, you know. And what happens is, like, all these architects, engineers, artists, they disappear off the face of the earth. And, you know, and so it's a mystery what happened to them all. And so it's focused on this one woman who runs this railroad line. And so I was like, oh, man, Ditko would love to draw this, and I'll get Severin to ink it. You know, then it would be fantastic. And so the Ayn Rand state approved it. They were like, oh, yeah, let's do this. And so I was talking with Ditko, and he's like, nah. I was like, what? Nah. He's like, I don't want to be responsible for, you know, drawing what these, you know, these characters look like, because everyone has their own idea in their head of what, you know, all the characters look like. And I was like, what? So I told Ayn Rand estate, and they were like, well, whatever Ditko does, we'll approve. You know, and he was still like, nah.
Did it ever come out? Did it ever come out? Not with Ditko, but just at all, or
no?
That's
because why bother?
Well, I thought you might have had Severin do it or something. You could whip it out in the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nah, that's just the thing, though. Too, it's one of my biggest disappointments, because that book would have been evergreen. Because I think something like she and Mickey Spillane are like the biggest sellers after the Bible of books in print and stuff like that. Yeah. You know, so I mean, this thing would have sold forever.
Yeah. Oh well.
So it's a real shame, but I can understand him. He had his, you know, he had his reasons.
Yeah. Well, he is a very interesting person. I can't say strange because I really didn't know him that well or at all, you know. But you know, it's like I just heard varying stories. But he just had his way. That's the basic thing, you know. Because there's I don't know if you remember the Facebook page of Letters by Steve Ditko. Yeah, and sometimes he writes big, lengthy, like 8-page letters to people, and it's like, okay, so he's not as strange as I thought, but, you know, at the same time, he had his way of doing things, so it's, yeah.
Well, like I said, I just was moving, and when I was moving, I found a letter from Steve that I never opened.
Oh.
And I still haven't opened it yet. I haven't found it yet unpacked.
It's the answer. Open it.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So...
you know what's funny? I was telling you about the photo comics.
Yeah.
So I sent him some copies, and like I said, it's about a supervillain. So I was like, you know, it's possible he'd be like, oh, you know, this is horrible, you know, and all that stuff. But just the opposite. He just wrote pages back about how much he loved it, and that, you know, and the gals were all gorgeous, and that it inspired him to draw compositions based on the photos.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, man, I'd love to see those.
Well, that brings us to the present here. What are you working on now? Are you working on anything with me? Should we talk about it or no? Or we should wait and keep people interested?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We can announce here for the first time ever.
Okay, so
that let me do a preface to it.
Okay, you're better than me.
It's that I was working with another writer, Bradley Mason Hamlin, who I've done a lot of work with over the years. He's got an imprint called Mystery Island Publications, and he does like pulp stories and poetry. And actually, he's got a new series coming out called The Intoxicated Detective Digest, and the first issue will be out this month. And I've done all the covers for 12 issues, plus the some interior illustrations. But he got in touch with Cracked, as Cracked.com, and wanted to pitch some comics. And they were basically, we have no interest in our past or in our comics or anything like that, and are not going to ever do anything like that. Yep. So I see that as open license to do are going to do together, you and me, Mark.
What am I doing? Oh, no. Was this having to do where you held me at gunpoint and said, "Scan away, boy"?
Exactly.
Okay, so
Basically, back in the day at Cracked, let me just say Cracked. That's how the French pronounce it.
Cracked.
Yeah, because, a lot of times I'd call up companies or whatever and say, like, yeah, I'm calling from Cracked Magazine. They'd go, Cracked Magazine?
Crack?
You're from Crack?
You got some crack?
Crack was king.
Crystal meth?
So, yeah, I knew this one girl, and she would always go, like, oh, Cracked.
Cracked.
So whenever I called after that, I go, like, yes, I'm calling from Cracked Magazine. But anyways,
with my chimpanzee Minky.
Back at Cracked, we do the theme books.
It will be a bomb, the exploding can. Anyway, go ahead.
I would do the theme book, so a lot of times we do, like, artist showcases.
Yes.
And, we did Severn and Jack Davis.
Yes.
So I figured, based on those stellar talents who are maybe both underappreciated nowadays since they're passing, and new generation of comic fans, we had talked about maybe putting these collections out, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Yes.
We're going to do the comedy of John Severn and the comedy of Jack Davis, because we're not going to use the Cracked logo or any of their, their trademarks and junk. They don't have any interest in Sylvester, so I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, we'll finally get the dream of all those other editors to wannabes. No Cracked and no Sylvester.
Yeah, exactly right. But I think it's fair use to use Cracked in the interiors, because it's for historical purposes, historical and educational purposes.
Yes.
And it's fair use, and I actually have the sectional code in the trademark there somewhere that we'll put in there. And but we won't use them on the covers, won't promote it,
Yeah.
That's Cracked.
But we are writing about it on the inside, articles and other stuff, You're fading. Where are you going?
I don't know. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
There you go. You went into a bag for a second there, a Peter bag. Anyway.
I think it must be Cracked or Mad, like, trying to screw it.
Yeah. Oh, no, they're reprinting stuff. How dare they? Okay, fine. We'll reprint the complete Lunatical instead. All right? Is that okay?
So I got the Severn book is pretty much done, and I'm start on the Davis one soon. So
the complete wacko. That's what I meant to say.
So maybe we do a Kickstarter for it once the books are finished. So because I've had a few problems with Kickstarter, like with that Monster Attacks book. I don't want to do any Kickstarters until these books are completely finished.
Well, as I've said before, I'm trusting your judgment on this because funding is not my strong point. I have a Patreon page, and it's like, I got one person, and it's like, I'm sure you have a Patreon page and have a few people. I'm one of your biggest fans, Mort. So I don't know beans about fundraising. I know how to do things and put out things, but to get paid, well, anyway.
We'll talk about this when we're not on the air.
Yes, I know. I'm just saying this to the general Vox Populi, not me, not you. I mean,
right. I'll tell you about how we get Uncle Vinny to collect.
Yeah. or Larry Levine. No. I don't know. Are these guys, I have to say, I shouldn't joke about them. Are those guys still around, the ones that were running Cracked at the time you were doing it?
I gotta think that Larry is long gone.
Oh, good. Okay, so I can say something.
Yeah. I mean, and even his kids, which were total freaking losers, if I can say that, they're probably, they might still be locomoting. Kenny Barado?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, he'd have to be in his, 70s or 80s now, it's so weird because, like, when I was working with a lot of these veteran cartoonists at Cracked, they were, like, in their 50s.
Right.
And I was like, damn, that's old.
Yeah, now we're older than that, yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, but, yeah,
Well, you did it at the right time. I mean, I told you this before, but I'll say it on the public record. It's like when I found out how old you were, and you're just a few years older than me, I was so insanely jealous. You were editing a humor magazine and getting all these cool artists and writers, and And then when you left, I was like, why did you leave? Anyway.
You would have been even more jealous if you had seen my girlfriends back then.
Well, weren't they all in the magazine wearing Cracked T-shirts and holding Sylvester plush?
No, those weren't mine.
I figured they were yours.
No, they were below the quality of the gals I'd be.
Ooh.
Those were all my friend Kevin McMahon's girlfriends.
Oh, wow.
He was a photographer.
Okay.
Yeah. Those were all his gals, his harem. Mine were gorgeous and classy.
Yeah. Well, even ones that weren't officially.
You're in a T-shirt ad hugging a Sylvester plush doll.
Well, you just always hung around cool people. I mean, even if she wasn't your girlfriend, I mean, you did befriend B.B. Buell, who was a Playboy centerfold, and in the book.
Well, that was when I was in high school.
Yeah.
That was in Maine.
Wow.
That was in Maine when I was still in high school, when I was like 16, 17, because I was like a little punk rocker, and
wow.
She was visiting Maine and saw me at the Maine Mall in my fake leather.
And then she became the photo version of Nanny Dickering after a while, so you got her in the magazine. And you'll read in the book the story, we don't have to repeat it here, of the first appearances of Liv Tyler in print. Anyway.
Well, yeah, that's just it. I met Liv when she was 2.
We're talking a long time here.
I had so many weird close encounters growing up in Maine. Like I went to school with Adam West's nephew.
Wow.
And just weird stuff like that.
I didn't even think. Well, I honestly have never been to Maine. The closest I've been is Massachusetts. So it's like
that ain't nowhere near.
Yeah.
Maine used to be part of Massachusetts.
I did.
We broke away about 200 years ago.
And I said, that's an oddball shape. No, but it was the big Massachusetts with the Maine part on it. I was like, wow, who designed that state? I'm glad it broke into pieces. Anyway. Well, you got good lobster back there. I've had that.
Damn straight. And it's cheap as hell.
Yeah.
It's like you find them on the street. You don't even have to go, put out a lobster pot. They're just like sitting on the sidewalk, and you just go out in the morning and go like, yeah, this one looks good.
And you got Bill Murray chasing him. Everybody get out of here. There's a lobster loose. Anyway. Okay. All right, we're getting silly. Or were we for the last hour and a half? Any final thoughts or anything? Anything you want to plug? Anything else?
Oh, sure. Well, of course, people should visit morttodd.com and check out all these totally fun books that are coming out, or that I have out and are coming out. Also have links to a bunch of nutty videos I've done, and I'm going to start emulating Mark Arnold soon and start doing some podcasts.
How dare you? Oh, yeah. Very good.
and I've already recorded a few, and because the thing is, like, I've worked with a lot of great artists and still am, and it'd just be great to record them. Soon after Ditko died, I got a call from Frank McLaughlin, who was he was the art director at Charlton and also well known to fans of DC and Marvel comics as a prolific inker, and was Dick Giordano's assistant inker and all that junk. But he was like outraged that all these reports of Ditko being a weirdo and a stranger and outsider and all this stuff. So we did this incredible interview where he tells some great stories about Ditko in the 60s and 70s and junk, which are pretty enlightening. So I edited that, and I got that ready to go. I just got to figure out the tech a little more, and
I'll help you with that in exchange that I can be a guest on your show one time.
Naturellement.
All right, cool.
Because you've got so many great books out that I can't believe that are just so that I can't imagine they actually have a mainstream appeal because they're so good. Because like Total Television and the Harvey stuff, and I don't know if you've noticed, I've been coloring a lot of Harvey stuff lately.
Yeah, Black Cat and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I also did a Baby Huey.
Yeah, that's true.
But I love Black Cat stuff, and and all the Harvey horror and all that stuff. And for some reason, I had a lot of that when I was younger, and so I'm just getting back into it. But I'm pretty sure Black Cat is public domain. I might put a book of that out.
Well, if you talk to
I know, right?
the Harvey sons, they will claim otherwise. So I'll leave it at that. You're falling into a bag again or something. Where are you going?
Really? No.
Oh, now you sound right. Yeah. So okay. It's funny. You kind of fade off and then come back with a.
I did actually just swivel in my captain's chair.
Aha! No swiveling allowed. So anyway.
But as far as current projects, I know there must be something spectacular happening. I got a book of unpublished Pat Boyette jungle stories that are pretty cool.
Yep.
Doing a lot of work with Paul Kupperberg, who can do probably Kickstarter soon. He's doing a book on how to write comics, and he's done some wacky romance comics that we're going to do a collection of. It's going to be a lot of other stuff, but my mind is overwhelmed.
Oh, very cool. It's okay. It's always so overwhelming in life. Where are we?
We've got about an hour and a half of this.
I know. Now we beat Milton Knight. So there, Milton. Ha. Anyway.
Yeah. Are you going to split these up into a two-parter?
No. I'll just do it.
People listen to the whole thing.
Oh, people would get mad. Oh, right before I get to the good, juicy stuff, I'll just say, and next week, just like I did the Cracked books, why did you split them into 2 books? Anyway.
Well, see, that's what I'm thinking for doing these things, because I don't know if anyone's got patience for more than half an hour, so
yeah.
I was thinking of splitting up things.
Yeah, well, they do take a longer time to upload when you have it this long, but, I'll probably stick it on there. Anyway, so it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, as always.
All right, and we
continued success.
You too.
What kind of book are you doing next that no one will want to buy?
No one wants to buy. Well, the ones that are done but not published are the Chipmunks book and the Warren Kremer book, who is artist at Harvey, who did Casper and Richie Rich.
Of course.
Not everybody knows.
I like his horror stuff too.
Yeah, and I talk about his pulp stuff, his horror stuff, the stuff he did at Ace, and all the other companies. So not just Harvey.
I'm sure I've got an anecdote about Ross there again, but
And then Monkey's solo book, which I've done the research for, and then my co-author Mike Ventrella is now kind of cobbling together to make it into something.
You should reprint the E.L. or the Donkey story from Cracked.
Oh yeah, well we could. I suppose, but
classic.
And but we're not even at the image selection phase. So and then. Currently working on Total Television Scrapbook, which is basically an updating of the old one, and I'm working with the daughter of one of the original owners who found these scrapbooks of it was Buck Biggers, who died, and he didn't tell me that he had all these scrapbooks of all this artwork and images and everything. She found it after he died, and she says, "Hey, let's do a book." So I'm working on that one.
Naturally. Yes.
And also correcting the errors, which I've mentioned earlier in podcasts that were in the older book. Actually, there's not too many, but a couple that just like, and so rather than doing
What book?
The original Total Television book I did. So rather than do a second revised edition, which I'm not a big fan of, I'm doing a completely different book. So,
Sweet.
but I will mention the errors that I did in the other book and say, oops, here they are. So
You're a bigger man than I am, Mark.
Well, I better stop eating so much, I guess. I don't know. Someday we gotta meet. I will go out to Maine some point, or you can come out to Oregon or something. Or we'll just...
Where are you, San Jose or something?
No, I'm in Oregon now, so Springfield, where the Shimpsons live. So I'm near Portland, but not your Portland. So
No, it's the alternate universe, Portland.
Alrighty. Well, if you have nothing else to say, or even if you do, we'll just call it a day.
Right.
All right.
Exactly.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Always.
All right.
I look forward to our wonderful Cracked omnibus collection.
Yes, we will be working on that too. As long with.
Right.
And I will
Take care of yourself.
You too.
And thanks to everyone who stayed to listen to all this garbage.
Yay! I'm erasing it in the next 5 minutes. All right.
All right.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care.
Mm-hmm. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening, and thank you again, Mort Todd, for being my special guest. And episode number 7 will be coming soon. If you would like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. Become a Patreon of me. Thank you very much. This has been the Fun Ideas Podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2018 Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you very much, and have a good night.